right, so now that we have all of the necessary info that we need in order to create a component using declarative services, let's also take care of some of the hard dependencies using BND tools to create this component. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. So let's first start off, we'll head up to File, up here at the top left, followed by New, and we're going to select Project. So this is going to be the generic project. And once we select Project, it brings up this wizard here, and we're looking for BND tools. So here on my screen, you're going to see this is going to be the second folder. Right? If you don't see it, you can type BND tools within that search wizard. So expanding out BND tools, we're now going to select BND OSGI project. Once we have that selected, go ahead and click Next. So I'll click Next right here for BND OSGI project. We're going to see this big warning show up letting us know that a BND workspace has not been created yet. So what we need to do first is create that workspace. Now, the workspace is going to contain all of the dependencies that are needed in order for BND tools to actually work. So let's first create that workspace by clicking on the link, create a workspace first. So clicking on that link, it'll pop up a new window. We're going to leave all of the defaults as is, and then click Next. From there, it's then going to show us a couple of different options. Now, as a word of warning, if you have a very strict network, right, sometimes you might not see anything. So if you don't, that's probably going to be one of the root causes, just as a warning. Once here, we'll see two different options. We're going to select the one that's already selected for us, BND Tools/Workspace. Once that's selected, let's go ahead and click Next, waiting for all of the objects to get downloaded, and then you'll get a list of all of the different dependencies that are going to be brought in. From there, let's go ahead and click Finish. It asks if we want to switch to the BND perspective. I'll leave the choice up to you. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click Yes. Cool. So after we've clicked Yes, right, the first thing we were doing is creating a BND OSGI project. We had to create the workspace first. Now that the workspace has been created, we get a couple of different templates to work with. So the template that we're going to be selecting is component development, since that's what we want to do, develop a component. So once that's selected, go ahead and click Next. And then from here, we need to give a project name. So I'll go ahead and start typing in the project name. This is going to be OSGI-service. Now for the Java package, we want to give it something that's a little bit more meaningful. So what I'm going to do next is uncheck the derive from project name. Once unchecked, we'll go ahead and highlight what's here inside the Java package and delete that. So once deleted, we're going to be entering com Liferay training OSGI service. So that's com.liferay.training.osgi.service. Once you have that typed out, go ahead and click Next. Okay, and everything is all good to go. So let's go ahead and click Finish here. So very good. Once we click Finish, we're going to see this window here. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping and I'll remove the previous one. So this window that we see here corresponds to a file called bnd.bnd. If we expand out the OSGI service project, you'll see the bnd.bnd file. And if you double click it, it'll take you to the same spot. Now, bnd.bnd, what this allows us to do is to basically configure the manifest file of the bundle. So whatever we enter here will be translated to the manifest file. So it gives us a nice little UI to work with rather than having to directly work with the manifest file itself. So before we dive into all of the details and working with the manifest file or the bnd.bnd, let's first create our interface and then we'll create the implementation afterwards. So first things first, let's head over to source, opening up the COM Liferay training OSGI service package, and you'll see this example.java. Let's go ahead and delete it since we're really not going to need it. So we'll go ahead and delete the file and we'll click OK. So let's go ahead and we'll create the interface or the API. So let's go ahead, we'll right click the package, heading over to new, followed by interface. And then the name of the interface is going to be clock API. So clock API. And then from here, once you have the name of the interface all typed out, go ahead and click finish. All right. So interface is created. We're going to add one method here. So we'll bump this down a couple lines. This is going to be public string get time. So a method here to get the time. So our client will call this API to get the current time. So very simple. Go ahead and save the file once you've finished typing the get time method. All right, so nothing out of the ordinary just yet. So with any interface, we're going to have to implement it. So let's go ahead and create the implementation class. And as we do, we're going to be making that implementation class a component. So let's go ahead, we'll right click the OSGI service package once again, heading over to new, followed by class. All right, so right click package, new, followed by class. And this is going to be clock impl or IMPL. So clock impl, right? And if you're used to using the wizard, if you really wanted to, you can click add for the interface, but what I'm gonna do here is kind of go through the motions and the thought process. So let's go ahead and click finish. And we're given our implementation class. So first things first, we want to implement, right, implement the interface. So that's pretty simple, right? We'll type implements and then clock API. Okay. From there, again, we're going to take a couple of shortcuts here. We're going to take our mouse cursor and hover it over clock impl so that we can add the unimplemented method. Save us a little bit of time. So we need to implement the method here. Okay, and so we're going to return a new date. We're going to return it as a string. And then we do have to bring in the proper import for the date. So go ahead and use the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-O. And we get a couple of choices here. So the date that we're going to be bringing in is the Java util date. So Control-Shift-O as in Oscar brings up this window, and we're going to select Java util date. Go ahead and click finish. Okay, let's see. I need to add my parentheses there, so that's my fault. And then just to make things a little bit neater, we can get rid of the to-do since we finished that, and then make sure to save the file. All right, so far nothing too crazy, nothing out of the ordinary, right? Just kind of standard Java going through this. Now let's go ahead and throw in our OSGI flare. From our demonstration, we saw how to create a component, right? Very simple. What we do is we're gonna have the @ component annotation, and then I'll tack on these parentheses, signifying I can add some elements within it. From there, I'll use Control-Shift-O to bring in the necessary import for the component annotation. Now, technically, I could be done here, but let's go ahead and give a little bit more detail as to what we can do with the component annotation. So as mentioned, the component annotation, we can add some attributes within it, some elements. And so when we create the components, the component is going to be registered into the service registry over in the OSGI framework. Now we have the ability to determine what the component is going to be registered as, what type of service. So one of the things we can do is type service equals, and then what the value of this is going to be is whichever interface we want to implement. Now, technically speaking, since clock impl is already directly implementing clock API, the service registry will already register that. So right now, this is being a little bit more explicit, right? We don't have to do this part since implements is already there. But if you look through Liferay's code, you'll see that we will always add this to be thorough. Right, so again, this part right now is not essential since we are already directly implementing the clock API. So very good. So far, so good. So we have taken care of a number of big steps so far. We have created our project. We have created the interface, and then we just implemented the interface. Now to test this all out, we're going to be creating the command interpreter, or this is going to be the client who calls the API. So before we progress, let me make sure to save. We'll see component over here. And now let's go ahead and create that command, or the command interpreter. So to do this, we're going to create another class within the package. So we'll go ahead, right click the package, heading over to new, followed by class one more time. And the name of this class is going to be called clock command. So clock command. Once you have that typed out, go ahead and click finish. Clicking finish on my end. Okay. So in this case, we're not going to be directly implementing anything, so that part is taken care of. Right, let's go ahead and let's first create the method to call the interface. All right. And so in order for us to call OSGI services or OSGI based interfaces, right, we first need to instantiate the service object. So first things first, right, this is the service object, and I'm going to call it clock. So we have a clock object that's going to be used for us to make our service calls. Now to add the OSGI flare to this, let me bump this down here. What we need to do is ask the service registry for a reference of an OSGI service that implements the clock API. So to do this, we're going to use the @reference annotation here. Now you're going to see an error, and that's okay. Right? We just need to bring in our imports. So using Control-Shift-O brings in the import for the reference. So cool. Now we can make our service call to the clock API, or to the object called clock. So I'm going to create a method, right? And it's going to be called tell time. Now technically, right, in Java syntax, I would make the T capital, but we'll make the connection here as to why I left it lowercase pretty soon. Okay, so we're going to do a simple sysout. So system out print ln, and what we're going to be printing is a call to the clock service or clock API to get the time. Right, and that's it. Nothing too special. So let's add our OSGI flare here. What we want this clock command to be able to do is to be able to actually call this method from the GoGo shell, from that command line that we've been working with. So in order to do that, what we need to do is make this a component. So we saw how to make a component, so let's go ahead and do that. Very simple component annotation. Okay, and I'm going to use Control-Shift-O once again to bring in the import for the component annotation. All right, so next thing is setting a number of properties for the component. So in order to set properties, the first thing we need to do is set or type this property element, as we'll call it. So property equals, and then the curly brackets here. All right, we're going to be specifying two properties. So the first one is going to be OSGI command function is equal to, and the function name here has to match with the method that we created. So tell time. Okay. Second property we need to specify OSGI command scope equals training. All right. Since we're specifying multiple elements within the component annotation, I'm going to add a comma after the last curly bracket and the closing curly bracket to specify what type of service this component is going to be registered as, and we're just going to register it as itself, clock command. Now let's talk about those two properties here. So within the GoGo shell, we can create new GoGo shell commands. So that's what we're doing here. And so the first property that we set within the property element is going to be calling the specific method. So when I type tell time in the GoGo shell, it's going to call the tell time method here. So the command function and the method name must be the same. So that's why we did not capitalize the T in tell time, just to make it a little bit easier for whoever's typing the command. Now the scope just provides a little bit more context as to where this command is coming from. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get more explicit with the GoGo shell. All right, so very good. So far, so good. Right, so we have created our three big parts to this exercise: the API, the implementation of the API, and then the client to call the service. So let's go ahead and test this out. Okay, so now that we have taken care of everything that needs to be taken care of for our component development, what we're going to do next is just deploy. So the last thing we need to do is head over, and within our project, we'll minimize some of these here. We're looking for this launch.bnd run. So we'll go ahead and double click the launch.bnd run. And once we do, before we click on that green play button, we're going to check this box here, auto resolve on save. So once you check the box, go ahead and save using Control S, or you can click on the floppy disk up at the top left, and then we're going to click Run OSGI. Right, you'll see the GoGo shell open up within your console, and then to test out the command, go ahead and type tell time. So once we type tell time, you'll see the time displayed on your console. So very good. So again, big points here: creating the interface, implementing it as a component, creating a client to call the OSGI service, and then deploying to test it all out.